And it wasn't until I sat with God and my issues at work that he told me to stand still. And I was like, what? Do you see what's happening? Do you see what is being said? Do you see the lies? And the Lord was like, sit still. I will show them who you are. Amigos, your relationship needs support. And when I think back to the beginning years of my marriage, where my husband and I were having the most amount of arguments and the least amount of sex, we needed help overcoming the number one issue in our relationship. And to do that, we needed to do something radically different than what we were already trying. You see, even dramatically different than what the generations before us were doing. And that support came in the form of marriage therapy. Marriage therapy was the game changer for my relationship. It allowed my partner and I to finally take a step back and have somebody else walk us through what was actually going on. And eventually we realized that most of the issues that we had with each other had actually nothing to do with the other person, but more so to do with our own unhealed trauma and our own things that we hadn't taken the time to process, but somehow was still showing up in our marriage. And that's why I love BetterHelp. You see, BetterHelp is the world's largest therapy service, and it's 100% online. With BetterHelp, you can tap into a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who can help you with a large range of issues. To get started, you just have to answer a couple of questions about your needs and preferences in therapy. That way, BetterHelp can match you with the right therapist from their network. Then you can talk to your therapist however way you feel comfortable, whether it's via text, chat, phone, or even a video call. You can even message your therapist at any time and schedule live sessions when it's convenient for you. If your therapist isn't the right fit for any reason, you can totally switch to a new therapist at no additional charge. With BetterHelp, you get the same professionalism and quality you expect from an in-office therapy, but with a therapist that is custom picked just for you. More scheduling flexibility, and at a more affordable price. Get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to my link, betterhelp.com/Karina F. Daves. That's BetterHelp, BETTER, help.com/Karina, F as in Frank, Daves. The link to this coupon is right here in my show notes. Amigos, at this point, you've tried it all in your relationship and nothing is working. You don't have anything to lose by asking for the support you know you need in the form of therapy. And what a better way to do that than with BetterHelp. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Karina F. Daves, relationship coach and speaker, where I help women stop arguing with their partners so that they can have more sex. Because who doesn't want to have more sex? One of the biggest things that women struggle with is a lack of satisfaction in their relationship. It's our best kept secret, and I know this because it used to be me. You see, I was a checklist human obsessed with the many achievements we're pressed to accomplish. Getting degrees, getting married, having children, buying a home. And after all it was achieved, I still felt empty inside. And so I looked to my partner to fulfill me. And this is when the arguing started in my marriage. It wasn't until I stopped blaming my marriage and finally decided to take a deeper look into myself, to work on my own need for control, my perfectionism, and to work on my own unhealed trauma, that I realized in order for my marriage to be better, it required a better me. Join me each week where I will be your personal relationship expert, coaching you through unpacking and processing your identity, values, and standards to resolve the number one conflict in your relationship, because a better relationship begins with a better you. Whether you're deep in your marriage or on the road to one, I will help you reflect on who you are, both in your partnership and outside of it. I know so many of us are struggling with this in such a private way, but believe me, a better relationship is possible, but it also starts with you. Are you willing to do the work? Welcome to Relationships. You understand? If you're loving this podcast and enjoying the juicy relationship gems, then head over to follow me on my socials at Karina F. Daves on Instagram and TikTok. Head over to my website, KarinaFDaves.com, and subscribe to my newsletter, Release Your Relationship, where I share weekly relationship advice on how to overcome the number one issue in your relationship. If you're really enjoying this podcast, don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or even Spotify. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode and share it with all of your amigos.
Reviews are such a personal way to hear your voice and interact with our community. Thanks so much for listening. And now, the Relationships You Understand podcast.
Amigos, welcome back to Relationships You Understand with me, your host, Karina F. Days, relationship expert, speaker, and podcast host of this dope podcast. This will be a 30-minute episode divided into 3 parts called How God Showed Up. So for the first 10 minutes, we are talking about how God showed up in my business and my career. Then it will be how God showed up in my marriage, and then it will be how God showed up for me personally and my personal growth. And so, my wonderful podcast manager, Megan, is going to cut this up. But for those of you that are watching it live, you will have the opportunity to listen to the entire 30 minutes now. Now, as you know, none of my podcasts are podcast episodes are super long, but this one will be, and I will do my best to keep on time. So it is 4:25. And I need to go to 4:35. Okay, here we go. Hi, Rudy. Amen. Yeshua. Yes, Jehovah Jireh, our provider. So let's start with how God showed up in my business and my career. And the reason why I wanted to do this series of how God showed up is because I think plenty of times we, as believers, tend to not necessarily be so public about how God is showing up in our lives. I think for the most part, people are very open about their relationship with God. Or maybe they're not. I know I am. I've always been since day one. I've always been open about the fact that I'm a believer. And I've also known that that came with a lot of risk. And that came with the possibility of people possibly thinking that I judge them. And I said this 5 years ago when I started this podcast. It's going to be 5 years in April. It's crazy, right? When it was called One Day at a Time. And when I started this podcast, I would always say that I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to love you, right? And true Christians know that our position is not to judge. And so I really want to share with you how God showed up in my life through these 3 different ways. Okay, so here goes. Let's talk about my business and my career. So for those of you that may not know, I actually have a full-time job. I work at a tech company as an employee experience regional manager. So what that means is we have globally about 33 offices, and I manage 10 of them. Now, I manage all of the US and all of Latam. So those are 10 different offices. And my job is to make sure that facilities is running right, employee experience is running right, and that the teams that are on the ground facilitating those offices are also giving our employees the best experience. So one day I can be planning a huge event, and the next day I can be flying to, launch a new office in Brazil. And then the next week I'm working on SOPs for how we are measuring, our budgets for the next quarter or something like that. So I have a wonderful team. And I would say I started at this company in 2022 by the grace of God, by the way. Can I just share that testimony? I had applied to over 700 jobs in a matter of probably like 7, 8 years. And I was part of the Obama plan, where basically I was working as a social worker for 10 years, knowing that my loans would be forgiven, but I had had enough with my position and I really wanted out. I really wanted to transfer over to another university or just forget it. Like, fine, you don't have to pay off my loans. I'll do it myself. And I literally got this job. It was recommended to me by such an amazing friend who's actually a sister. And she texted me one day in like November or December of 2021. And she was like, Gotti, are you still interested in a job like this? And I was like, absolutely. And don't you know, I ended up getting the position 10 years and 2 months after all of that. And it was like the Lord asking me to sit still. So anyways, my first year at this company was epic. I really was proud of my accomplishments. I transformed so many spaces. I traveled a lot. I created a lot of relationships, and I was really, really proud of myself. My second year was extremely rocky. It had a lot to do with a mixture of office politics and higher management, I would say, and their beliefs of our team, their beliefs of me and my work and things of that nature. And listen, I could sit here and create a whole bunch of assumptions in my head about what it could have been. And I did that for a very long time, and it spun me out. It really spun me out. But I didn't start off the year in a good place. And in at the end of 2022, I would say, or maybe this is 2023. I think it was at the end of 2022, we actually suffered a pregnancy loss, which I didn't share, and I'm sharing with y'all now. And so the beginning of 2023, actually, 2022 was amazing. 2023, half of 2023 was amazing. The latter half of 2023 was difficult. And so I started off 2024 very rocky. That's actually how it happened. And I remember sitting with it. I remember calling a whole bunch of people for advice. Like, what do I do? Like, I just don't know what to do. I don't know how to solve for a lot of these issues. And especially as a relationship expert, I can see how people are moving, and sometimes things are out of your control, right? Sometimes a company will be a company and corporate will be corporate, and it's outside of your hands. And there were many beliefs about me that were just not true. And I had no idea what it could have been attributed to. And I remember sometimes thinking, like, is it attributed to the fact that I'm very public about my business and my relationship business? Could it have been that perhaps I am too forward. I'm a very direct person, and I was very intentional the first year, making sure that I was very much riding along versus the next year, I was very much in a year of implementation. And that's what caused a lot of the tension. And I never felt like during that time, we couldn't just like get on the same page with me and our team and leadership. And so at the beginning of 2024, I also had lost a team member, and one was assigned to me, and I really wasn't happy about that. And I really just wasn't happy. I wouldn't say I was burnt out, but I was borderline really tired of carrying a lot of the weight. And I also was not happy that I didn't have the ideal makeup of team that I wanted. And so in the beginning of 2024, I called a whole bunch of friends and I was like, what do I do? What do I do? And people gave me really good advice. And then some people were like, start searching, but the market is crazy. Some people advised me to really put my foot down and make sure that I, write everything down just in case. There were a lot of different pieces of advice that people gave me. And to be honest, I did it all. Like I took everybody's advice and I tried it. And that's part of me and being a risk taker. And so in 2024, I was just in this messy place. And in the summer, things started to get a bit better when I brought it to God. And how God showed up is when I asked him to. Plenty of times, you know God, but you don't ever ask him to show up. And it wasn't until I sat with God and my issues at work that he told me to stand still. And I was like, what? Do you see what's happening? Do you see what is being said? Do you see the lies? And the Lord was like, sit still. I will show them who you are. And I was like, but is that your job or my job? And here's the thing, like God knows how stubborn I am. So during that time, I was like, fine, Lord, you want me to surrender this? You want me to put my head down and just work my butt off? Fine, I will do that and I will trust you. And so over the next 6 to 8 months, that's exactly what I did. And I ended my career in 2024. I didn't end, but the way that that I would say it ended was on one of the highest notes I've ever had. And that came from such a deep place of surrender. And I know if you're listening to this, you're like, but what about this paperwork? And what about this person saying this and yada, yada, yada. And I think the way that God showed up was like, I was in line to file a complaint. Just think about this hypothetically and imagine the Lord coming in and putting his hand over my chest and saying, back up, I got this. You ever be in that situation where somebody's like, back up, I got this? That's how it happens. And I felt this like intense, like, I got this. This is not for you to handle. And that was difficult for me. And it ended up ending in like the best no ever. The reviews I got, my performance review that's coming up, I had one in the summer. I know it's like on a high. When it comes to my business, I would say that the way that God showed up, now I'm transitioning to that. So as you know, I have my 9 to 5 in tech, which I commute to the office during the week for, and which is why a lot of my reels are in my car. A lot of my stories are in the train tracks at the train station, walking in the city of New York. And I really felt like at the beginning of this year, I was not trusting myself in my business. I was very much relying on what other people were asking me to do. And the thing about it is, like, I'm such a good student and I'm also a great teacher, but I'm only a great teacher if I feel like what I'm teaching, I'm an expert in. Versus I am not a good teacher if it's something that I feel like I lack experience in. I'll just continue being a student. And so at the beginning of this year, I really felt like, I had all these thoughts about my business and I was like, so much has to change, all of this other stuff. And then it hit me where God was just like, you just need to serve. Like, you just need to serve. You need to go back to 2021, 2022 Karina F. Daves that just made reels to serve people. You need to serve and you need to figure out how to solve people's problems. And so that's really where the movement of solving your number one issue really not stemmed from, but continued. And because last year, if you have been following me for a long time, I had veered off. And this is just like good business testimony to share with you. But I had a couple of clients that had results with intimacy. And so I veered off and I started selling, how to stop arguing and have more sex. And I thought it was landing, but I did it. I'm very committed. So I did it for 6 months and it didn't land. And I realized that I veered off. And so I went back to solving your number one issue. And I asked myself, like, what is it that I want to do? And I have a post that I'm looking at and it says, I'm going to hit 100K in my business this year, no matter what. I'm not in a rush. Everyone wants to work with me. Seek God first. I can solve any relationship problem you have. I'm better than Gottman. Like, that's the heart posture that I had to keep telling myself.
Hola, amiga. Here's the thing. You've mastered everything else in your life but your relationship. You and your partner are not as intimate as you used to be. You are both stuck in this awful cycle of arguing that starts with bickering and ends with your routine blowups every few months. Every single time that you bring up an issue looking to resolve it, they feel like you're complaining, and then you begin to distance yourself. You feel like you're living with a roommate rather than your life partner. Your relationship, amiga, needs comprehension. Comprehension allows you and your partner to forgive each other quicker. Comprehension allows you and your partner to prioritize each other again. Comprehension is the very thing that will allow you both to give each other the space you need during those blowups. It stops the cycle of arguing. In my private one-on-one coaching program, I help women just like you come up with the exact communication strategies to begin to comprehend their partners and have their partners comprehend them. I will tell you the issues about your relationship that will take your couples therapist 6 months to tell you in just the very first session. It only takes one person in the relationship to do the work for there to be any progress. Either way, you will grow, and that is what is important. Through a mixture of one-on-one coaching, relationship framework, and plenty of aha moments, you'll finally be able to understand your triggers more deeply and decrease the time you spend arguing with your partner. You'll become more of an active listener versus being offended all the time. I want to help you stop arguing on the way to date night and actually have energy for post-date night activities, if you know what I mean. I'm on a mission to show women like you how to talk to their partners in a way that moves the needle for your relationship rather than leaving you stuck in this toxic cycle of arguing. I know many of us are struggling with this in such a private way, but believe me, a better relationship is possible, but it begins with you. So let's work together. I want to help you. Go to the link in the podcast notes to book a sales call where we'll talk about everything that's happened so far, what you've tried, and how I can help. I can't wait to work with you to get you and your partner to stop arguing and have more sex. I can't wait to meet you.
And so I would say the first quarter was very difficult. I'm looking at my sales. I had 3 sales in the first quarter, which I'm used to maybe having more along the lines of like 6, minimum 3. Well, I did have 3, but it was just too low for me. I'm like, I don't think this is good. And so I ended up really trying everything out. I hired an amazing business consultant that at the time has and still has a marketing agency, and I thought maybe it's a marketing problem. Kiera actually is her name. She's amazing. And she studied my business like it's nobody's business. And we came up with a lot of just like little tweaks, and she was one of the first people to tell me like there's not a lot that you got to change about your business. It just needs to be tweaked a bit. And so during that period, we tweaked some things, and it went well. And here's the thing, like I'm a big risk taker, and so I was taking a risk, and we ended our time together, and I was alone again, and I was like, dang. April came, no sales, and I was like, what am I doing? Then I took her advice and I decided to do a cheater series called the Cheater Series. And I walk you through how, when you get cheated on, what happens and sort of the mindset that you have and how to work through that. Well, lo and behold, May, I end up selling from my podcast, which I had never done. And so the goal is to not only sell from social media, but to also sell from things like email or your podcast or other offers that you may have. And at this point, I was only selling from social media. Now, when I started selling from my podcast, I was like, this is amazing. And I got so happy. And I was like, we're going to solve every single cheating issue you have. And it was a very sensitive topic for me. I think divorce and cheating is actually a topic that um, I had some difficulty coaching clients through because of how much pain it brought. But I realized that like I am the very person that got aligned in their lives to solve it. And so after that, we ended up again doing some more tweaking, and we ended up working together in August and September one on one. And I just had this shift in my mindset. And Kiara was one of the people that told me this. And another coach, actually, Anuma as well, shared with me that, like, you're Karina F. Daves, and I don't think you realize, in other words, that you're Karina F. Daves. And I was like, yeah, I don't. Because I'm on the other side. So I don't see what you see. I mean, I can rewatch it, but I don't feel what you feel because I'm the one sharing the information. So I only know from what you share with me in DMs or comments or things of that nature. And so in the end of quarter 2, I made the decision to trust myself. And I was like, you know what? We just gonna tweak this and we're gonna tweak that and we're just gonna go with it. And we're gonna risk any type of comfortability. And what's interesting is when I decided to trust myself, and I would also give credit to a lot of people. I feel like I just have to name them to share. I would give credit to my really good friends that are also business coaches, Erica Cruz, Kat Del Carmen, Liz Fernandez, Mariela de la Mora, and also my business coach at the time, DL Sharon, Kiera from KLC Studio, Anuma also, who's a health coach, was also giving me business advice. There was just so many, I think God sent people in my ear that were really there to remind me, like, girl, you've already built the brand. Like, all you need to do is show up. And I was like, really? I was like, why do I always think I got to make it different? And I didn't. And I'm way over these 10 minutes. So sorry, Megan. But I would say that how God showed up for my business, and I'll end it here, is that we ended up hitting 6 figures for the very first time in sales in my business in 2024. And not accumulated, but just in 2024, we hit 6 figures in sales. My accountant was so proud of me. My husband was so proud of me. My friends were so proud of me. My coaches were so proud of me. And I just want to share that because I think, there really is this perception that things are not possible. And I just want to let you know and remind you that everything is possible with God, but God. with God. Like everything is possible with God. Um, and I'm really proud of myself for that, especially, and I just have to say this and not in a boastful way, and I hope you know my heart posture. For me, this is such a big deal. I might cry, but this is such a big deal for me because I, and I know everybody has a lot going on, so I'm not comparing myself to anybody, but to me, this is such a big deal because I have a lot going on. I'm a wife, I'm a dedicated wife, I'm a mom, I am um, somebody that has a full-time job and a business and clients. Like, I'm just really proud of myself. And so God came through in my business and my career by telling me to stand still, to trust him and to trust myself. And so if you're listening to this in your car right now after it gets posted, just know that this is the end of part one and of our series of how God showed up. So I'm going to go ahead and pray for your business and your career right now. And Megan, you can end this episode when I'm done praying. Okay. Father God, we thank you so much for this day. We ask that any convictions that we have in our hearts that are heavy about the job placements that we're in, or career placements that we're in, or business transactions that we're making, Father God, would you convict us of moves that are just not aligned with ethics, that are not ethical? I really feel it on my heart right now that many of us have to be convicted of how ethical we may be during a lot of these moves that we're making in our lives. So, Father God, I ask that you bless our careers, bless our finances, bless our businesses, but also make sure that we feel that deep conviction of, are we being ethical? Okay. All right. Listen, if you're listening to this episode, I want you to know that I am here for you, and come back for part two as we continue this series, how God showed up. And next, we're going to talk about marriage. And if you're listening to this as well, I want you to text me I text the word relationship to 208-943-5363. And let's chat about your number one relationship issue. And we'll get you subscribed to the hotline so I can give you a private episode under 5 minutes telling you your problem, telling you an answer to your problem. Okay.
If you're loving this podcast and enjoying the juicy relationship gems, then head over to follow me on my socials at Karina F. Daves on Instagram and TikTok. Head over to my website, Karina F. Daves, and subscribe to my newsletter, Release Your Relationship, where I share weekly relationship advice on how to overcome the number one relationship issue. If you're really enjoying this podcast, don't forget to leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode, and share it with all of your amigos. Reviews are such a personal way to hear your voice and interact with our community. Thanks so much for listening to the show, and can't wait to have you back again. I love you so much.